One day when I was out with my friends, a black guy surprised me at the club. He treated me so badly that it is unforgettable. However, the unexpected happened, and he proved to me that he was a beast in bed. Stay until the end to know this story. So without further ado, make yourself comfortable, and we invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the little bell so you don't miss any video. That night at the club started out like any other. I had gone out with my friends, looking to disconnect after an intense week of work. The place was packed, the lights were flashing to the rhythm of the music, and the atmosphere was a mix of laughter, conversations, and bodies moving to the beat. I was at the bar, waiting for my drink, when I first saw him. He was a tall, black-skinned guy with a presence that seemed to dominate the room effortlessly. He had a tight leather jacket and deep-set eyes that sparkled under the club lights. There was something about his look that left me intrigued, but also intimidated me. However, what happened next was not what I expected. As I tried to walk past him to return to my friends, I accidentally pushed him slightly. Before I could apologize, he turned to me with a cold and annoyed expression. "Can you watch where you're walking?" he said in a dry and cutting tone. "Hey, are you liking the video so far? If so, leave us a like and subscribe. Let's keep going." I was shocked by his reaction. I tried to apologize, but he simply gave me a look of disdain and walked away. The interaction left a bad taste in my mouth, but I decided not to make a big deal out of it. After all, it wasn't the first time I had encountered someone with such a defensive attitude. However, throughout the night, I kept noticing him. He seemed to be everywhere, whether on the dance floor or at the bar, always surrounded by people, but with a serious expression that contrasted with the festive atmosphere. Something about him intrigued me, despite our awkward first meeting. At one point in the evening, I ended up near him again, this time on the dance floor. Our gazes met briefly, and although I tried to remain nonchalant, I felt a sort of tension in the air. That's when, to my surprise, he approached. "You're persistent, huh?" he said with a smile that didn't seem entirely friendly. "I beg your pardon?" I answered, confused. "I've seen you staring at me all night. If you have something to say it at once." His defiant attitude threw me off, but I decided not to be intimidated. "I wasn't looking at you, but now that you mention it, maybe you should relax a little," I said, trying to stay calm. His expression changed for an instant, as if he didn't expect her to respond to him that way. But instead of getting more upset, he simply let out a small laugh and walked away again. That night ended without further incident, but I couldn't get him out of my mind. There was something about him that attracted me, despite his aloofness. It was a few days before I saw him again. This time, it was at a cafe near my work. He was sitting alone, reading a book, and he seemed like a completely different person. His expression was calm, almost melancholy, and I couldn't help but be curious about his story. However, before we continue, we invite you to give us a like and subscribe. Let's continue. I took a deep breath and decided to approach. "Hello, have we met?" I asked, pretending to be casual. He looked up and, recognizing me, seemed surprised. "You're the one from the club, aren't you?" he said, this time with a much friendlier tone. I nodded, and to my surprise, he invited me to sit down. We started talking, and little by little, his attitude began to change. He told me that his name was Samuel and that he worked as a photographer. He also explained that he had had a difficult week, which perhaps justified his behavior at the club. As the conversation progressed, I realized that Samuel was much more than he appeared. He was intelligent, passionate about his work, and had a sense of humor that was starting to come through. We stayed in the cafe for hours, talking about anything and everything, and when we finally said goodbye, I found myself looking forward to seeing him again. From that day on, our interactions started to become more frequent. We would meet for coffee, go for a walk, or just hang out. Over time, I realized that Samuel had a barrier that he didn't let down easily. There was something in his past that made him stay defensive, but I never pressured him to tell me. It was one evening, as we walked through the park, that she finally opened her heart. He told me that he had grown up in a difficult environment, constantly facing prejudice because of his race and sexual orientation. His defiant attitude was his way of protecting himself from the world, but with me he felt comfortable enough to let his guard down. "I've never felt so vulnerable with anyone before," he admitted, looking at the floor. "And I've never met anyone like you before, Samuel. You're amazing, even with your walls. That night, we kissed for the first time. It was a moment full of emotions, as if all the pieces of the puzzle finally fit together. Our relationship was not perfect, but it was real. We learned to support each other, understand each other, and grow together. Samuel taught me to see the world from a whole new perspective, and I helped him to trust people again. Please don't forget to subscribe and like us for more content like this. Let's continue. Today, I look back and I can't help but smile when I remember how it all started. Samuel, that boy who treated me badly at the club, ended up being the love of my life. Sometimes, the best love stories start in the most unexpected ways. Our relationship, while intense and full of learning, was not without its challenges. As Samuel and I got to know each other better, we began to discover aspects of our personalities that clashed. He was reserved, someone who preferred to face his problems alone, while I had always believed in the importance of talking and sharing things. There were times when Samuel would, without warning, withdraw into himself. We could be having an amazing day, and suddenly his face would darken, as if he was remembering something that took him away emotionally. At first, I was frustrated that I didn't know how to help him, but over time I learned that he didn't always need a solution. Sometimes he simply needed me to be there, beside him, silently, to remind him that he was not alone. One night after dinner at my apartment, something happened that marked a before and after. We had been laughing and cooking together, and it seemed like a perfect evening. But suddenly, Samuel began to fall silent and his gaze was lost. When I asked him what was wrong, his answer was almost a whisper. "Sometimes I'm afraid this is too good to be real," he admitted. I was deeply moved by her confession. I reached over and took his hands in mine, assuring him that, though the world might be hard, we had something strong and special. Samuel nodded, and that night, for the first time, he told me in detail about his past. She told me about her childhood in a complicated neighborhood, where she had grown up facing constant prejudice for being different. His passion for photography had been his refuge, a way to capture the beauty he saw in the world, even when everything around him seemed to be falling apart. He also confessed to me that for a long time he had doubted that anyone could truly love him for who he was. That conversation brought us together in a way I had never experienced with anyone before. I began to understand that her initial attitude at the club had been nothing more than a shell, a reflection of the barriers she had built to protect herself. Every day, those barriers crumbled a little more, and I felt privileged to be the person with whom he chose to share his vulnerability. So after a few long looks, we ended up kissing and finally making out. I always thought that because of his somewhat haughty nature, he would be a beast in bed. And I was right. He treated me too badly in bed, but without going over the top, all I did was enjoy myself. Of course, it wasn't all serious times. Samuel had a fun and playful side that I loved. He loved to surprise me with unexpected plans, like taking me on impromptu photo shoots in unusual places or giving me little treats that he knew would make me smile. Once, he took me to a field full of sunflowers just to take a picture of us in the middle of the flowers. That picture became one of my most prized possessions, a tangible reminder of everything we shared. There were also moments when we simply enjoyed each other's company in silence, like lying on the couch, watching movies or listening to music. Those instants, though simple, were the ones I valued the most, because they reminded me that love doesn't always need to be grandiose or spectacular. Sometimes it is found in the small details of everyday life. However, the real test came when Samuel received an offer to exhibit his work in a gallery in another city. It was an incredible opportunity for him, but it also meant that we would be separated for several months. The thought of distance terrified me, but I knew I couldn't let my fear interfere with his dreams. "This is important to you, Samuel, and I'll be here, supporting you, no matter what," I told him one night while we were talking about it. Her eyes filled with tears, and she hugged me with a strength that conveyed everything she felt. It was at that moment that I understood that our love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. If you liked the video and this content brought you value, leave us a like and share it with your friends so they don't miss it.